Hello, everybody. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government, coming to you with a special broadcast today on really what is one of the more horrible things I've ever seen in politics. And but unfortunately, I've seen this in politics time and time and time again over the 30 years, 35 years since I was a state lobbyist for National Rifle Association. And it's just abhorrent what happened in Texas, the shooting in Texas, the mass murder in Texas, uh, the individual, the person who was consumed by evil who did it, and the families who and children who lost their lives, the people who were injured, the teachers who were killed, the grandmother who was injured by the perpetrator. Um, but the saddest part of this, in many respects, is the complete callous attempt to manipulate a tragedy into political gain. And if you haven't seen it, I'm going to show you something here that I found to be just pretty almost unbelievable that it happened. And but it's just pretty unbelievable. And I'm going to try to do this, but unfortunately, my Facebook thing isn't working. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to show you something here, and I'm hoping that you'll be able to see it. Um, and let's see. Let's click on go with this. What we should be seeing is Greg Abbott and Governor Greg Abbott. You guys should have a picture there of Governor Greg Abbott and others talking about, and the sheriff of the county, Uvalde County, talking about what is happening and kind of an update yesterday. And of course, it's not actually playing. So consequently, I'm going to get out of this. Let me just tell you what happened. Texas candidate for governor, Beto O'Rourke, who infamously lost to Senator Ted Cruz in 2018. Beto O'Rourke went and he had a meltdown where he decided politically that it was in his interest to break in to the press conference featuring the sheriff and the attorney general and others, briefing the media on what was happening, what the circumstances around the deaths were, what a lot of the law enforcement standards was going on, things about what was happening in those schools, why were they so vulnerable. So they're having a real conversation about the tragedy. And Beto O'Rourke basically came into the press conference designed to inform the public about the circumstances, and started screaming and yelling about how it was their fault, and this was all, basically jumping up and down and trying to politicize the event. Now, O'Rourke's been on record as being for banning guns for a while, so that's not a big surprise. But it was the callousness of doing it that caused the sheriff to finally, who was asking him to, be quiet, sit down, shut up. This is inappropriate. And finally, the sheriff had had enough, and he called him a sick son of a bitch. Okay, and for trying to exploit it, and and I can't tell you how much I've seen that, and how much I've felt that at times through my career. When I remember in New Jersey when they were trying to ban semi-autos, and and we had an attack on the World Trade Center before 9/11. And an attempt to blow up the World Trade Center, and the left immediately turned it into we have to stop. This is why we have to ban guns. And even though they were trying to blow up the World Trade Center using explosives, and so I remember time and again, if there was any kind of shooting, that it was always dredged up, and it was always turned into almost a carnival of the left, and how obnoxious and how horrifying it was to watch. But the one thing I was always kind of glad of was, the left, the people who want to ban guns, they're the only people in the world who feel joy when there's a mass murder. They're the only people in the world who look at that as an opportunity. Oh boy, another opportunity. Whereas the rest of the world mourns. There's some people who seek to take advantage and seek to gain from that. And I'd hate to be those people. I mean, I just hate to be somebody who looked at the death of children as being something that they could take advantage of, because the sheriff gets it exactly right. You have to be a sick son of a bitch to do that. You have to immediately think, oh, great, get the fundraising mail out. That we're in the middle of a big fight. We're going to have this is something we raise money on. Let's call out the standard communicators. Let's get everybody on page. Let's dust off the gun control agenda, and let's try to because we're going to raise some money on this, and we're going to pay our salaries. I mean, it's sick, it's terrible, and it's my hope that Beto O'Rourke's career is ruined as a result of his grasping onto this. There's nothing. The pain and suffering for the people who are in Uvalde, Texas, the people who lost their lives and people who lost their loved ones, are feeling immeasurable pain right now. Many of those people are spending time in the hospital with their loved ones who are trying to recover, worrying whether or not they'll come out alive or not, or how they will come out, how they may be transformed. Others are looking at it saying, how did we get here? How did this happen? How did somebody who was in our community become so evil as to try to make this attack? And there's a lot that's coming out about the individual, and I'm going to hold fire in terms of that individual. But one thing I do know is this: to kill 20 people, 22 people. I'm not sure what the latest number is, but 21, I guess, is the number. To kill 21 people, injure others, means that you literally have to walk around shooting people, walking over dead bodies, shooting the next person, shooting the next person, shooting the next person, in a catatonic state of absolute just evil. It is unbelievable that somebody would do that. And so it's incomprehensible when we start thinking about these things and what to do. It's incomprehensible that the police were on the grounds for an hour before anybody went in and took out the shooter. It's that, I thought we learned something over the last 30 years. And one of the things we were supposed to learn was interdict as fast as possible. Don't let somebody who is killing people to continue to do that. Now, they made the decision that they thought it might be a hostage situation rather than a murder situation. And so they're trying to evaluate the situation. But the fact of the matter is, the person who went in was a Border Patrol person. It wasn't the local cops. And I think that we've got to really, it's on the state of Texas. They need to make certain that they have people trained appropriately to deal with these situations. I also think when we look at it, it was obviously this person who committed the murders was on social media for at least a few days, crying for help is the only way you can look at it, because they were proclaiming they were going to do this to various people. And in the world that we're in, we're almost trained to everybody does their own thing and don't take it too seriously, because you don't want to end up getting accused of anything related to it and being canceled. But gosh, folks, this is somebody's threatening to do stuff like this, turn them in, get somebody involved. And back when we had I don't know if the Eddie Eagles program still exists, but we used to say, the Eddie Eagle program trained children to say, if you find a gun, leave it alone and tell an adult. That was the Eddie Eagle program. Very simple, very understandable. Well, folks, if you get notification, if you think somebody is struggling in such a way that could end in them taking their own life or taking the lives of another, interdict. Try to engage with that person, try to determine what's going on, and get authorities involved. If you feel like it's like you can't get involved, but to kind of have people coming out now feeling all guilty because they were told and they didn't do anything doesn't make, don't be that person. And I feel really badly for those people. But the last piece of this that I want to talk about, and that is there are those, including some religious figures, who are saying, pray and, thoughts and prayers is not enough. We have to act. We have to have legislation. We have to do all this junk, right? Well, thoughts and prayers are the most powerful prayers. Thoughts are meaningless. Prayer is the most powerful vehicle you have. Is the most powerful vehicle you have because it provides both comfort to yourself, and being covered in prayers matters. It matters. When I remember George W. Bush saying this back when I was in the W administration, and we were having a meeting of all the political appointees, of which I was one of many. And I was sitting way back far away, but he talked about how the prayer of Americans, that he could feel it every day and it strengthened him. And, I heard Donald Trump say the same thing about the prayer of Americans and how it helped strengthen him, how it really did make a difference. And there's never going to be a time in our nation's history where we need more prayer more than now. With all the trouble, all the things that are going on, with people suffering from isolation from COVID, the mental illness that's resulting from that, the drug addiction and that's come, the overdoses. 30,000 more Americans died of overdose in 2021 than died in 2019. 30,000 Americans died of overdose. That's straight COVID. The open borders with the free flow of fentanyl and drugs into our country. The wars that are going on in the streets of our country for control of the drug trade, and the crime wave that results. And truthfully, the partial reason for that increase in crime wave is because the decision was made, and the Trump administration supported it and pushed it, to basically go into the federal prisons and release a significant portion of the population under the guise that they were just nonviolent drug criminals, when in fact, in many respects, they were people who were violent criminals who were running kingpin operations, and they were the kingpins, and they pled down their charge, so they didn't, because it's harder to prove one thing than another, and they pled it down so they get lesser sentencing. But the fact is, the homicide rate is going up. And at least partially because of that. And the reason I know that is because in Texas, where they tried the same darn thing a few years earlier, the homicide rate went from, in the 2 years since they put in Texas, they made that change. This was 2019 when I looked at this data. The homicide rate had gone up a full one homicide per 100,000 people as a direct response to letting criminals out on the streets. I mean, it shouldn't be a big surprise. Now, the recidivism rate has been cut by that because there's a lot more interdiction, and there's nothing wrong with letting people out who have served their time, letting people out who have proven through good behavior and through doing things which show that they're going to have a much higher likelihood of being a productive person and not somebody who goes back into crime. But the fact is, recidivism, while the recidivism rate has gone down, as we've gotten fewer people are going back into the system after being let go from this project, there's still still about half of them are projected to be back into the system within 5 years. So based on the crime, what's happening right now. So we have a problem. And sometimes you put people in jail because you're protecting society. And quite honestly, on this one, we disagreed with President Trump. I disagree with President Trump. I told them we disagreed. I told them why. As an NRA lobbyist, one of the things we did was we tried to make certain that people who had a couple of combination factors went to jail. And that is, if you used a gun in a crime, you went to jail for a longer period of time with mandatory sentences. That worked. Putting the people who are most likely to commit violent crime behind bars based on the fact that they were willing to take a gun into a place where they were going to commit a crime, meaning they meant to use it. They were willing to use it. People don't take guns unless they're willing to use them in that crime circumstance. And so since they did that, they were given longer sentences. And what we found, not surprisingly, was when you took the small percentage of people who commit crimes who actually engage in violent action, you take that small percentage of people and you put them in jail, that you have fewer people, you lower the crime rate, you lower the homicide rate pretty dramatically. And that's what happened from the late 1980s, the Miami Vice period in this country, through about 2010 or so. And so we had that phenomenon, and it works. And so, yes, we have to figure out how to sift through who can get out of the prison better and how that should work. But the bottom line is just having just saying, okay, well, you meet X, Y, and Z criteria, and you've been there a certain period of time, is really the wrong solution. It's been proven wrong time and again. Our current crime rate is up. It's only partially because of that. It's also because, once again, when you have open borders and free flow of drugs into the country, you can talk about making marijuana legal all you want, but people aren't getting shot over marijuana. They're getting shot over cocaine. They're getting shot over opioids. They're getting shot over heroin. And marijuana is merely the way you get to be sticking a needle in your arm later on. A lot of people don't end up going that route, but a significant percentage do. And so marijuana isn't what the wars on the streets have ever been about. The wars on the streets are about controlling drug territories, just like they were in the 1930s, and 20s, about controlling the alcohol distribution, the illegal alcohol distribution in the cities. And so you have those wars in the street right now are between people who are there, gangs that are there who can traditionally control the sales, and between the cartel soldiers who are being sent through our open borders and fighting those wars with lots of. And gun control doesn't change that because the cartels don't really care what our gun laws are. I know it seems strange, but cartels don't care. So if anybody wants to sit there and say, if Joe Biden were to listen to this, I say, hey, Joe, close the border. Let's go after the cartels. Let's go after the people who are making our children targets. Let's stop playing around. Let's stop having an open border. And let's actually go after the people who are targeting our country and trying to kill our children through opioid addictions and fentanyl. That fentanyl is coming in through our ports, through the Chinese through our ports, and it's coming in through through Mexico, whether it's through Mexican ports, the ports in Mexico, or fentanyl being produced directly by the cartels. Doesn't really matter. Bottom line is a war is being waged on America. It's being waged on our heart and our soul. And it's time for our American president to stand up and say, I'm closing the border. I'm not going to do this anymore. And I know a lot of my friends on the libertarian side think that we can just go around, play around and say, oh, well, it's everybody do what you want to do. Sorry, but I got too many friends, too many kids I know have died from the opioid crisis. Too many kids too many lives lost. And the numbers that we see in Uvalde, Texas, it's heart-wrenching, it's heartbreaking that a deranged individual killed those kids and killed 2 teachers. It's heart-wrenching. But 30,000, we had 100,000 people die last year of opioid addiction. 100,000. 100,000. Under the Trump administration, that number was going down. We shut down everything in 2020 because the public health official said this is what we have to do to be healthy. And the grim reward is 30,000 more people dying of drug addiction. The grim reward is suicide's way up. The grim reward is mental illness is through the roof. The grim reward is that not only the 100,000 people dying of opioids, but a vast increase in the number of people who are addicted to drugs. It's time for us to get serious. Shut the border. If you want to invest money in treatment for people who are addicted. And let's get America off to kick the habit rather than having our cities like Denver become opioid dens effectively as they make things like magic mushrooms legal to go with the pot that's legal. It's insane to expect people that we're going to, by encouraging a drug epidemic, that you're going to get anything but bad consequences out the back end. In terms of school safety, unbelievable that the school didn't have automatic locking doors. Unbelievable the school didn't have a armed security guard on campus all the time. Unbelievable that we had apparently that the concept of shelter in place still remains as the ideal that's held up in a classroom, because anybody who's taken a class in dealing with an active shooter class knows you got 3 things you can do. 1, you can fight. 2, you can run. 3, you can shelter in place. Shelter in place essentially puts you into a passive attitude where you're going to sit there and just hope that nobody comes through the door and shoots you. Okay? It is the absolute worst of the 3. And yet that appears to be what the option that is preferred and was taught to be preferred. And quite honestly, the only option that actually works, if somebody comes into your school with a gun and the intent to kill people, you have to assume they're going to kill people. So you darn well better fight from the beginning. Fight every single inch of the way and not allow that person to be able to execute their mission. Because if you sit passively by, you're going to end up dead. And that is just a sad reality, and it's the big takeaway. Last piece. Prayer matters. Pray for those survivors in Uvalde. Pray for the family of the shooter. Pray for everyone involved so that we can get forgiveness. And pray for our country. Pray for Joe Biden so he can see the light. Pray for other politicians. Pray for our country that we can heal. And as opposed to having this divide us as it is intended to do, further divide us, pray that it unites us in a constant, in a real mission to deal with the underlying problems that actually create this kind of tragedy. Because evil exists in the world, and we have to start recognizing that. And when evil pops its head up, people have to recognize it and say, wait a second, we have to do something about this. We have to try to help that person. And evil doesn't just go away. So let's pray for our nation, and that we learn to recognize and stand up to evil. And with that, I'll let you go. We do have a take action somewhere in here. I think there's in the description on gun control. I would urge you to contact Congress and urge them to oppose any and all efforts to push gun control. It is I think it is on the bottom of this, but I know this has been a little somber, but I apologize for that, but it's really an opportunity. This is a sad time, but it's time to reflect on how do we deal with evil in our midst and what's the right course. And folks, from my point of view, you don't deal with evil by taking away people's ability to defend themselves against evil. That's just stupid. Doesn't make sense. And anybody who thinks that makes sense, I question their motives. With that, I'll let you go, and thank you for tuning in. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. And tomorrow I'm going to do something that hopefully that's a little more fun, a little more upbeat. We'll see what happens, but I'm trying to get something done that I can do a little fun thing tomorrow for Friday. But for that, take care, and we will see you at the next broadcast. Oh, hold on. I've got comments here. I meant to do comments. So let me do some comments. Yeah, we've got Diana Areola, extremely disrespectful rant. Yeah, I wish I'd been able to show it to you, but yeah, it was incredible. It was terrible. They're all evil. Yeah, unfortunately, there's a lot of that going around. Beto, I really feel sorry for him in a lot of ways because he's such a pathetic figure. A guy who is named after Robert Francis Kennedy, runs around pretending to be Hispanic. It's just pretty pathetic. You'd think that the Robert Francis going along, O'Rourke would be enough of, having his family naming him after RFK would be enough of a symbolism for him to be able to go around and actually utilize that to kind of set the tone for who he is. But instead, he runs around pretending that he's Hispanic when he isn't. So I guess it's, I don't know if he should be in jail, Chris, but I think he's in the trash heap of history, if nothing else. Yeah, Diana, he did. He started with his own grandma, and there's a lot being said about why, but fortunately she did survive. And hopefully we'll learn a lot more about what happened by talking to her. Jim, you're right. We have created a dangerous stew for people to do whack stuff, and it's and creating a constant climate of fear about disease, combined with mental illness, combined with being locked up, combined with the drug addiction that occurs, combined with the insanity going around in terms of gender bending stuff. All that stuff kind of cooks into a pretty noxious stew, and when people consume that, a lot of people lose their capacity to make rational judgment. I'm not going to talk about specifically what might have been caused this particular individual to act the way he did, but I think we're all kind of aware of some of the stuff that's being talked about on the internet. But I don't know what's true and what isn't true, so I'm not going to speculate related to that. Mental problems, indeed. It's ultimately, this is something that we have to get our grip on. I'm going to go back to a long time ago when I worked in Los Angeles. I went to the University of Southern California, as I think I've shared in the past, and I worked as an administrative intern for the LA City Recreation and Parks Department. And every day, and City Hall is just north of Skid Row, at least it used to be. I don't know where it is now. In the same place. I don't know if Skid Row is the same place, but it was just north of Skid Row. And so I would park on one end of Skid Row and walk through Skid Row to get to the office. And it was and every day I do that walk. And in the morning when I walked up, there were, you literally had people just laying everywhere, and they were in desperate straits. But there's one guy who I remember and will never forget for as long as I live. He stood on one street corner nonstop and just stood there and did this. Every morning when I went by, he was doing that. Every afternoon when I came back, he was doing that. For the entire, I worked there like 9 months. For the entire 9-month period I was there. And it was heart-wrenching. But the truth is, because the ACLU had sued the state of California because to say they had to have criminal charges against the mentally ill and couldn't just keep them in mental hospitals to help them and provide them treatment without them either being committed or being or having committed a crime. There were, I don't know if it was thousands, but hundreds of people who were essentially thrown away and were living in squalor, didn't have anything, and didn't have even any idea of where they were. There was absolutely no hope. They were essentially abandoned in the middle of a big city. And it would make me cry that this was happening right in the shadows of City Hall. It was terrible. And obviously those times when you're going home after dark, when you're going to your car after dark, it was not, sometimes a little bit unnerving. And I'm not a small guy. And so, so nobody was going to bother me, but I couldn't imagine a woman walking there by herself. But it was so mental health problems and our failure to deal with them have existed for an awful long time. And sometimes when we've dealt with them, we're housing people in crazy asylums that are suitable for a really scary movie, aren't the answer either. But as a country, we really need to figure this out, because ultimately, and I think there's private sector answers, I think there's public sector answers, but as a country, I can't imagine anybody thinking it's all right to leave somebody standing on a street corner who has no idea they're there, has no idea where they are, and just saying, oh yeah, it's okay, he's just sitting there, he's doing his thing. I mean, it's abandoning people. And I pray that our churches are able to grow in their capacity to help. Because if a church were to provide somebody shelter, were to provide somebody help, were to invest in ways to help people, some of those people would receive help. But most importantly, if we interdict early, hopefully we can keep a high percentage of those people from ever getting to the place where they're standing on that street corner going. And with that, it's kind of not exactly a limited government theme, but it's, if we don't deal with the underlying mental health and drug addiction problem, we are going to end up with, the natural result is you have people commit acts that are incomprehensible. And I don't know what caused this kid to do this. I don't have any idea. Hopefully we'll figure it out. But the fact of the matter is, the solutions that are being proposed in terms of even protecting the schools themselves, those are Band-Aids. We need to figure out how to interdict and make it so people who are falling into absolute bitter despair have, have some capacity. We have some capacity to identify and help them before that despair becomes suicide or rage. And with that, I'll just leave you with that. So, and thank you for listening. I really appreciate it.